So I rolled out my slab, but I wanted to remind you that we're going for the 1/4 inch thickness. And as you roll, you want to go from corner to corner and you want to lift up when you get to the edges so you don't make your edge smash down. Keeps your slab nice and even. And then when you've rolled out to pretty much your guides on the side, you can make sure that it's a 1/4 inch. These are exactly a 1/4 inch. The thicker part of a ruler is usually about a 1/4 inch. And you will keep flipping. So I like to roll sort of corner to corner and then straight up and down. And then I flip every few passes across. And there we go. So you definitely also want to rib your slab or smooth it out. So you'll have your rib or your metal rib or your card, your gift card. You're holding it at an angle and basically aligning the particles, smoothing out your clay, any inconsistencies. Not only is this good for texture, it's good for strengthening your clay and your slab in general. So once I've done that, of course I've checked that it's large enough for the template I cut out. I've cut out a 10 by 4. I think you should do at least 10 inches because you can test whatever you do, however far around this is going to go, because this is going to tell you how wide your mug will start. And I will be working on it. It will actually get a teeny bit wider as I work on it, but I think that's the minimum it should be. And then 4 inches is pretty good for the height. All right, so I know it's not sticking. I have ribbed both sides. Now I'm gonna put my template down. I'll do it this way because it's curling. And if I wanted it to be longer, actually I'll show you how to do that. If I wanted it to be longer, I'm going to take my needle tool or whatever you're using for cutting. And I start at the end. I don't start here because I get a nicer cut. Now you can use your ruler to be even more precise. I think that's a good idea. I'm actually going to cut along my ruler, along my template. If my template isn't a plastic or silicone template, and I hold my needle tool straight up and down when I do that. I'm going to put these to the side, but I'm not going to let them dry out. So as soon as I cut this, I'll put them in my bag. Move your slab according to how you're cutting. Your cuts will be a lot straighter that way. The slab, you want to make sure you're not manipulating it, but if you gently move it, you're good to go. Okay. Then obviously you can move your board. I'm working on a table, so I can't move the whole table. And you could move your board instead of your slab. And you don't want to get caught on the paper, so make sure. So now if I wanted to go a little longer than the 10 inch, I'm just going to cut this last part off. And then instead of, let me show you, instead of going here, I can go further. Now, instead of just moving this, I'm actually going to move my template down, and that's just going to ensure that I have a much straighter line. So I'm looking over here too, making sure it's all lined up. I can never completely rely on eyeing it when I'm cutting straight lines. I have that same issue when I cut paper, so I always measure. All right, so here I have my slab. It is a 1/4 inch. I actually feel like it's a little thick, but that's okay. So I have that, and then the next thing I'm going to do is do my edge at a 45-degree angle so I can make sure that when I put this together, it's going to fit together a lot nicer. So I can take the edge of my board. So I've gone ahead and I actually thinned out my slab a little bit. So I rolled it out more and I recut it. And now I'm gonna do the cutting of the edge. So I line it up to my table and I make sure that I take my cutting tool. I'm using a needle tool, but a knife works just as well, potter's knife or a plastic knife. And you want to make sure your angle is at relatively a 45-degree angle, and you're holding the other side of your clay, and you're just going to take a smooth cut across. And then I'm going to flip my clay, and I'm going to cut it the same way, but on the other side. So I flipped it. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hold the edge, make sure my slab doesn't go anywhere. I'm holding it at a 45-degree angle. And these little pieces are great for little coils that you need for securing seams. So keep all this stuff, keep it in your bag, keep it covered. And now we will put everything together. So we have our mitered edges. We will score them. This one will be on that side. And then we'll slip them. I have some chopsticks here. Because it's plastic, it's the same piece, that's all the same stage of clay, plastic. It is okay if you're just adding water at this stage, not to smear out your score lines, but it's okay if you don't have slip. So bringing these together, did I do it right? Yeah, I did. The angle should come together a lot nicer than if it was just flat cutting up against each other. And that way it kind of creates a nicer seam. And you can press that, smear it a little bit. So I don't want to pick it up too much, but you can smear kind of this part on top of that part. And you definitely want to make this feel secure. So you won't be able to completely clean it up now. You can turn it over to work on the other side. And you also want to be careful, like right now I don't have a completely rounded form, but that's where I'm going to end up. So you push that together, and then when this is together, I will show you how to make sure that seam is nice and secure with a coil, and using your rib or your fingers to make sure that you have this part nice and secure. All right, next video. To secure your seam, you're going to take a scored and slipped coil. You're going to score inside, and you're going to hold the outside where the seam is. Place the coil inside. It should fit the entire space. You'll probably want to get your fingers a teeny bit wet and make sure you're supporting this on the outside, and you will smooth the coil until basically you can't see it. And then as far as the outside goes, you make sure that you are going back and forth over the seam, and you can also use your rib or your card to do that as well. Once you've smoothed all that out, the seam, then you're ready for your marking. So I have my seam here, so I'm going to find the middle with a ruler, just sort of eyeing it. And wherever I think my middle is, I'll just make small marks that I can see. I don't know if you can see them, and then I'm gonna make marks as well going the other way. So you have 4 marks. And you're going to do your darting in between those marks. I'm going to line up my dart. I'm going to do the smallest line. It's in between my 2 marks I just made. And when I do this, I'm just going to take my needle tool or my pencil, and I'm going to make sure I'm just doing a guideline. So I'm not going to cut yet. So my guideline is there all the way around. Then I'm going to take my cutting tool at an angle and I'm going to cut out my lines. So basically, instead of holding my tool straight as if I'm cutting straight into the clay, I'm going to angle it in this way. So I'm going to follow this line, but I'm going to cut in this way. And the same, I'm going to follow this line, but keep my tool at the same angle. So if I'm cutting this line, I'm supporting it. I'm following the outer line. This is easier if your piece is on the table and stopping at the bottom. Now I have that angle, so I'm still going to do the same thing here. And I'm basically, and it's okay, oopsie, it's okay if you do this in multiple, I'm going to do it in multiple strokes because I am not sitting on the table. My piece isn't sitting on the table. Okay, there we go. So this will just help when we put these together, they're going to lay together and seal together a lot better. Keep your little pieces. All right, so I have all of my darting cut out. It's a little messy, but forgive me. I was doing it without it being on the table. It's okay to flip it over and make it circular again, make it rounded again, and then there we go. You always want to check that. All right, so when we put this together, we are going to score all of the areas, and then we'll slip them and put them together. And I do think it's a good idea to have slip for this, even though it is still all plastic. Slip is a good idea for darting because you're asking the clay to do a lot. And you want to give it as much reinforcement as you can. All right, scoring and slipping, and then I'm going to put these darts together. So when I do this, I'm going to gently start turning these sort of flaps in. I'm not going to do it all at once because if I do it all at once, the clay might break. And so I just have to be gentle with it, be patient. It will come together eventually. And when it feels like they're about to touch, that's when you start securing it a little more. So the deeper your darts are, the deeper you cut out, the higher up the darts will go on your piece. So if you did the top line, you will have more length here. Okay, and once I put this, I have these close together, then I want to make sure I'm looking at the whole piece and seeing that it has a good balance. All right, So I'm going to smush these together and smooth them out. Okay, so the darts are secure on this side, and now I want to make sure they're secure from the inside. So you can turn it over. You can see that it's pretty messy in there. Because there's slip that has squeaked through, that's a good sign. I like to do it like this. It keeps my rim rounded. And I have used coils, and I'm just going to put, you can either dunk this whole coil in water, and then it's kind of one step, and you just hold the other side so you're supporting when you're putting the coil in, and then you're basically pressing the coil and rubbing it into that seam. If you have any extra, you can just pinch it off, and you can do a better job of smoothing that out when you turn your cup over after we add the square bottom. You'll do that on all the corners. Okay, now it's time to add a bottom. These coils will need to be smoothed a little more, but this is pretty plastic, so I'm going to wait a little while. Okay, so I have this pre-made. It is about the thickness of my piece, the walls of my piece. It can be a little thicker too. You just don't want it super heavy, and you don't want it thin, thin, thin. So you will turn this over. I see that my seam is looking a little scary there. I'm gonna rub that seam. Okay, and you basically will roll out a slab. If you have some left from cutting your slab, then it's perfect. And when you set it down, you need it to be at least as big as the bottom. When you set it down, you will cut on the sides of it, cut around, don't cut into your mug, the body of your mug, and you will get kind of a wonky rectangle or square. You don't want it the exact shape, make sure it's bigger. And when you get kind of the wonky one, just clean it up by cutting with a ruler or a straight edge or something like that. And then to put it on top, you will score, slip, you're going to turn this upside down and put that on. One thing I wanted to point out here is this bottom will be curved in a little bit. So when you score, you can sort of score away, just score a little more to make it as flat as you can. Okay, so I have smoothed out, I still have my bottom on like this. It's not finished yet. I've smoothed out my coils on the inside. I think there's like a big nail mark of mine in there. And don't have any water in the bottom, that's important. And since I've smoothed them out, I want to check my darting because some of it I might push it apart. So I want to make sure that that's nice and smooth and not coming apart. So I'll fix all of that, like for example right there. I'll make sure that that's nice and smooth. So because you're cutting the clay and putting the clay back together a lot in this project, you have to constantly check the seams. Constantly check if the seams are coming apart, make sure you're reinforcing them all the time. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to work on the belly. So basically the belly of the pot is just like the belly of a person. It's about right here. So I'm going to bowl out my piece by basically putting my hand aside with some water on my fingers. I'm going to support it on this side and I'm going to push out like I'm on the inside of a belly. So I'm stretching the clay. Just like when we did the darting and we're stretching the clay, we want to make sure that we do it slowly. So I'll do a couple passes, then I'll turn it, and I'm basically going to be doing this around the whole piece. And I'm going to concentrate kind of between the darts for now, and then we'll see how it goes. So I'll be doing it in 4 sections. Okay, this is a great opportunity, by the way, to smooth out any of your seams. If you still had any of your little snakes in there, little coils, you can smooth those out as you're going. This will be up to you how far out your belly comes. I like this. Just make it symmetrical around the pot. If you start seeing a seam bursting, make sure you take care of that. Make sure you go slow. So you can see my rim hasn't really widened. It's really the belly of the pot. Also, make sure with a damp sponge, but no water, if you squeeze it, very little water will come out. Make sure that you get any excess water that's inside your pot, because if it sits in there, it's gonna turn to mush, and it's completely different consistency, of course. So now I'm going to show you how to make your rim a little nicer for drinking. We're gonna curve it out a little bit, and we're gonna make it thinner. The first thing we're gonna do is curve it out. So I'm gonna hold the pot as if it was on a table, like yours will be. And I'm basically always going to keep this part of my hand supporting, and I'm gonna keep it in the same place all the way around. So this will be the area that the clay will learn how to bend around. And again, you wanna do this slowly. I wouldn't start right at that first crease you did, and or that first seam. And you will wet your fingers a little bit, and then you're basically slowly, remember, don't get too much water because you don't want a ton of water dripping inside the pot. You basically want to just curve it around your hand as you work around the pot. And when you do this, you need to do it slowly. It will totally break on you if you're doing it too quickly. And don't try to get the amount of curve you want all in one pass. You're gonna go around the mug multiple times until you get to where you want to be. Okay, so I have stretched this as much as I want to. Here's the basic form. And I'm going to show you how to make the rim even nicer than this. Your curve can be a little more, it can be a little less, that's all good. Your belly can be a little fuller or a little less full. With a little bit of wet hands, I'm pinching these together just because my seam is scaring me a little bit. I'm just pinching as I go around the edge because it's getting rid of that hard edge. It's making it a little thinner at the top. And also, we have to account for, what's the use? Why are we making this? If we want to use this as a drinking vessel, we definitely should be thinking about how it's going to hold liquid, how it's going to feel on our lips, how it's going to pour out of the mug. So all of those things are important. And I know you don't have a lot of experience with this, but you do have experience drinking out of lots of different kinds of glasses. So ones that are straight and sort of rigid definitely don't function as well. They don't feel as nice. So you want to make this lip rounded. You can also use your sponge, but be careful with this because your sponge takes away some of the clay and sometimes it leaves it kind of gritty at the top. So I would do that very minimally. And you can just keep doing this technique until you're happy with it. You can also use a little piece of plastic, wet plastic, thin plastic. That is a really nice smoothing tool. And then when you're finished with the smoothing, we will wait until this isn't super glossy. You could put a blow dryer to it. You could just sit it out for 5 minutes. As long as it's not super glossy and you don't have a ton of water, you don't have a ton of water in the bottom either, you are going to turn it over, keeping its shape, and you're going to work on the bottom. So for the bottom, I like my darts being there. So I want to make sure that my darts are one of the most, that they're featured in the pot. So I'm going to, some people kind of clean this up and leave it like this. It looks like it's sitting on a coaster. Not really my favorite, but you know, you can do that if you want. I like to take a little bit of, I start from the center, and I'm just basically pushing this clay in. And I'm going to make it almost seamless. So it's hard to do this because I don't want to keep lifting it up. It loses its shape when I lift it up, and I don't want to see I'm pressing it in there. So I want to make sure that I'm able to fix that inside as well as I go, if that happens. You don't need to use your fingers for this. You can use tools for something like this. And you will go all the way around, sort of smearing the sides into the edge without warping your form. If you find that you're warping your form, just turn it over and fix it. I haven't touched the corners yet. And when I get to the corners, I'm going to do a little something different. So first I'm going to check my form inside, make sure that's good, that's actually good. I tap it to make sure it's nice and secure on there. And now with this, I'm going to take my fingers that have been dipped in water, and I'm just going to smear it. I might get rid of some of that clay. Smear it in there. So then it sort of lines up with my darts, and the design works a little better, I think. So if you have extra, obviously you can take that off. And you'll work on this after you get it secure and smoothed a little bit. You'll work on this so it's not, like right now, it's not very even over here. You'll work on this more when it is leather hard. But that is pretty much where we will stop on the first day. And then the second day, hopefully this has set up some, and it is leather hard or wet leather hard, I would say. You can clean it up a little more if you need to. And then we will make a handle and put that on.